This is a lecture for Chapter 13. We're on middle childhood here, and we're going to cover psychosocial development. What we learn in this chapter. What helps some children thrive in a difficult family, school, or neighborhood? Should parents marry, risking divorce, or not marry, and thus avoid divorce? What can be done to stop a bully? And why would children lie to adults to protect a friend? Nature of the child. The middle childhood years are characterized by steady growth, brain maturation, and intellectual advances. Children become more capable and independent and social. Negotiation and compromise become important. Going to cover the self-concept here. And in terms of social comparison, this is the tendency to assess one's abilities, achievements, social status, and other attributes by measuring them against those of other people, especially one's peers. It contributes to the development of realistic, culturally viable self-value. In terms of peer relationships, these are crucial during middle childhood and are correlated with the self-concept. The nature of school-age children. I'm going to focus on Erickson's insights here on industry versus inferiority. This is characterized by tension between productivity and incompetence. It proposes that children judge themselves as competent or incompetent, productive or useless, or winners or losers. And self-pride is dependent on others' view. Continuing on, now we're going to focus on Freud and latency. Emotional drives are quiet and unconscious. Sexual conflicts are submerged. Children acquire cognitive skills and assimilate cultural values by expanding their world to include teachers, neighbors, peers, club leaders, and coaches. And sexual energy is channeled into social concerns. And talking more about self-concept, it contains the ideas about the self that includes intelligence, personality, abilities, gender, and ethnic background. Gradually becomes more realistic, specific, and logical as influences from peer and society are incorporated. This potential for psychological growth is evident in the advance a child makes in self-concept in middle childhood. However, advance is not automatic. Family, culture, and social context affect advancement. And self-concept is dependent on social comparison, an awareness of social prejudices and gender discrimination, and an increase in materialism. All right, a question. What would you list as signs of psychosocial maturation over the middle childhood years? Children responsibly perform specific chores. They make decisions about a weekly allowance. They can tell time and they have set times for various activities. They have homework, including some assignments over several days. The children are less often punished than when they were younger. They try to conform to peers in clothes, language, and so on. They voice preferences about their after-school care, lessons, and activities, and are responsible for younger children, pets, and in some places work. Children strive for independence from parents. Of course, culture is crucial. For example, giving a child an allowance has been typical for middle-class families in developed nations since about 1960. It was rare or completely absent in earlier times and other places. All right, now we're going to discuss resilience, and it involves the capacity to adapt well to significant adversity and to overcome serious stress. And it suggests differential sensitivity. Important components. Resilience is dynamic. A person may be resilient at some periods, but not at others. Resilience is a positive adaptation to stress. If rejection by a parent leads a child to establish a closer relationship with another adult, that child is resilient. Adversity must be significant. Resilient children overcome conditions that overwhelm many of their peers. Accumulated stresses over time, including minor ones, are more devastating than an isolated major stress. Here are some dominant ideas about resilience. Through the years, in 1965, all children have the same needs for healthy development. In 1985, factors beyond the family, both in the child, low birth weight, prenatal alcohol exposure, aggressive temperament, and in the community, poverty and violence, can harm children. In 2005, we focus on strengths, not risks. Assets in child, intelligence and personality, family, secure attachment and warmth, and community, schools, after-school programs, and nation, income support and healthcare are crucial. In 2012, gene, family structures, and cultural practices can be either strengths or weaknesses. Differential sensitivity means identical stressors can benefit one child and harm another. And in 2015, communities are responsible for child resilience. Not every child needs help, but every community needs to encourage healthy child development. Dominant ideas about resilience today. In 2017, resilience is seen more broadly as a characteristic of mothers and communities. Some are quite resilient, which fosters resilience in children. Current thinking about resilience with insights from dynamic systems theory emphasizes that no one is impervious to past history or current context, and many suffer lifelong harm from early maltreatment. But some weather early storms, and a few not only survive, but come out stronger. Children in Sri Lanka were exposed to war, a tsunami, poverty, deaths of relatives, and relocation. Accumulated stresses increased pathology and decreased academic achievement. Child soldiers in the Sierra Leone witnessed and often participated in murder, rape, and other traumas. Recovery was more likely when children were in middle childhood, when war occurred, when at least one caregiver survived, when community rejection did not occur, and when daily routine was restored. U.S. homeless children living in temporary shelters showed delays in early measure of development. Negative outcomes were buffered by a supportive parent who provided affection, hope, and stable routines. All right, we just mentioned cumulative stress. This is repeated stresses, daily hassles, and multiple traumatic experiences that may challenge resilience. Repeated stress makes resilience difficult, is more devastating than isolated major stress, and includes such things as frequent moves, changes in caregivers, and disruption of schooling. As always, social context is crucial. There is family as a protective buffer. There's usually a committed caregiver, usually the mother, and a daily routine. Now we're going to move on from resilience to cognitive coping. Coping measures reduce the impact of repeated stress, and it can change the interpretation of family situation and other circumstances, development of friends, activities, and skills, participation in school success and after-school activities, involvement in community, church, and other programs. A child's interpretation of family situation, poverty, divorce, etc., impacts how that situation affects him or her. Continuing on with cognitive coping, there is also social support and religious faith. A network of supportive relatives is a better buffer than having only one close parent. Grandparents, teachers, unrelated adults, peers, and pets can lower stress. Use of religion, which often provides support via adults from the same faith group, has been found to be helpful. And parentification. This occurs when a child acts more like a parent than a child. This happens if the actual parents do not act as caregivers, making a child feel responsible for the entire family. This has an effect related to child interpretation of what they do. All right, focusing on families and children. There are shared and non-shared environments. Genes affect half or more of the variants for almost every trait. The influence of shared environment. This is children raised by the same parents in the same home and shrinks with age. And the effect of the non-shared environment, for example, friends and schools, increases. And there is family function and family structure. Family structure is the legal and genetic relationships among relatives living in the same home and includes nuclear family, extended family, step family, and others. Family function is a way a family works to meet the needs of its members. Families provide basic material necessities to encourage learning, to help development of self-respect, to nurture friendships, and to foster harmony and stability. All right, now we're going to discuss the needs of children in middle childhood. Families help children provide basic physical necessities. It encourages learning, helps development of self-respect, nurtures friendships, and fosters harmony and stability. That is just like the other slide. I apologize. Continuity and change. There's no family always functions perfectly. Children worldwide fare better in families than in other institutions. School agers value continuity and having fathers at home, and stability challenges occur in military families. A view from science, the effects of genes and environment. Children raised in the same households by the same parents do not necessarily share the same experiences or home environment. Changes in the family affect every family member differently, depending on age and or gender. And most parents respond to each of their children differently. All right, now we're going to discuss diversity in family structures. There are two-parent families, it's referred to as the nuclear family. There's also the step-parent family or an adoptive family. Sometimes the grandparents raise the children. And more recently, there are two same-sex parents. There are also single-parent families. These consist of single mothers that are never married, single mothers divorced, separated, or widowed, or the single father, or a single grandparent. There are also more than two adult families. This includes the extended family if grandparents live at home. There are the polygamous families, which I don't know where that's legal at, maybe in Utah. And these may also be included as two-parent or single-parent family categories. And there is divorce. How can these facts be interpreted? The United States leads the world in rates of marriage, divorce, and remarriage. Single, cohabiting, and step-parents sometimes provide good care for the children, but children usually do best living with married parents. Divorce is a process, not a decree, and custody disputes and outcomes frequently harm children. Some insight. Both marriage and personal freedom are idolized. This creates a cultural conflict. A shrinking middle class impacts the ability to find jobs and support families. This creates a strain on marriages and families. Some of the greatest effects of divorce come from the frequent changes in residence, school, and family members. Parenting style, for example, discipline, too much or too little child responsibility, and conflict of secrets can impact. All right, connecting family structure and function. For two-parent families, they generally function the best. There are better educational, social, cognitive, and behavioral child outcomes. Mate selection effects and parental alliance. There are positive effects beyond childhood, and some reported benefits or correlates. There are also adoptive and same-sex families, as I've mentioned, typically function well, often better than the average nuclear families, and vary tremendously in ability to meet the child's needs. In terms of step families, some function well, positive relationships more easily formed with children under 2, more difficult with teenagers. There's a solid parental alliance, and it is more difficult to form, and child loyalty to parents is often undermined by disputes. Focusing on the grandparent family or skipped generation family, generally lower income, more health problems, less stability, often involve grandchildren with health or behavioral problems who are less likely to succeed in school, and receive fewer services for children with special needs. And focusing on the single parent families, on average, the structure functions less well for children. There's lower income and stability. There's stress from multiple roles. There's the benefit from community support. It is more common in the United States than in many nations. No type of two-parent family guarantees good functioning, but the fact that 2 adults are involved nudge it in the right direction. All right, moving on from structure and function to family challenges. There are 2 factors that increase the likelihood of dysfunction in every structure, ethnic group, and nation, and those are low income and high conflict. Many families experience both. Financial stress increases conflict and vice versa. Focusing on wealth and poverty, family income correlates with function and structure. Low SES contributes to increased family risk factors. Any risk factor damages only if it increased parental stress and adult hostility, the family stress model. In terms of conflict, family conflict harms children, especially when adults fight about child rearing. Fights are more common in step families, divorced families, and extended families. Although genes have some effect, conflict itself is a main influencer of a child's well-being. All right, moving on, we'll talk about the peer group and child culture. Particular habits, styles, and values that reflect the set of rules and rituals that characterize children as distinct from adult society. And that includes fashion, appearance, peer culture, attitudes, and an independence from adults. It is passed down to younger children from slightly older ones, as you might remember. And the culture of children is not always benign. Children in middle childhood are happiest playing outside with equipment designed for work. This wheelbarrow in the picture here is perfect, especially because at any moment the pusher might tip it. Makes that fun. And dangerous. Alright, we're still focusing on the culture surrounding the child. We're going to focus on friendships and social acceptance. In middle childhood, children value personal friendship more than peer acceptance. Friendships lead to psychosocial growth and provide a buffer against psychopathology. There are gender differences. Girls talk more and share secrets, and boys play more active games. For older children, they demand more of their friends. They change friends less often and become more upset when a friendship ends. They find it harder to make new friends and seek friends who share their interests and values. I think that counts for adulthood too. And there are popular and unpopular children. which many of you listening to this fell on one side or the other. High school is always fun, isn't it? Okay, universally children seek friends. This is culture and cohort. They both affect popularity. Popular children in the United States are kind, trustworthy, and cooperative. They're also athletic, cool, dominant, arrogant, aggressive, around the 5th grade. Unpopular children in the United States are neglected by peers but not actively rejected. They are ignored but not shunned. They do not enjoy school but psychologically unharmed. There is also the aggressive rejected. They are disliked by peers because of antagonistic confrontational behavior. And there is the withdrawn rejected. They are disliked by peers because of their timid, withdrawn, and anxious behavior. And of course, we have to talk about bullies and victims. Bullying is repeated systemic efforts to inflict harm through physical, verbal, and social attack on a weaker person. And there's also the bully victim. This is someone who attacks others who is attacked as well. It's also called the provocative victim because he or she does things that elicit bullying, such as stealing a bully's pencil. I'm sure all of you are thinking of examples of all of this that go back to high school and middle school. I as well. All right, there are types of bullying. They are physical, verbal, relational, and cyberbullying. Physical includes what you would expect: hitting, pinching, or kicking. Verbal is probably also what you expect: teasing, taunting, and name-calling. There is relational, that is destroying peer acceptance and friendships. And cyberbullying, which of course is the latest addition, is the use of electronic means to harm another, bullying them online. And there are causes and consequences of bullying. Causes include genetic predisposition or brain abnormality. There are parenting and caregiving environment is involved, and their age and peer group. Consequences include impaired social understanding, lower school achievement, relationship difficulties, and depression. Can bullying be stopped? Well, if we try hard enough. The whole school community must be involved, not just the identified bullies. Intervention is more effective in earlier grades, and evaluation of results is critical. Research finds that children are better at stopping bullying than adults are because bystanders are pivotal. Since bullies tend to be low on empathy, they need peers to teach them that their actions are not admired. Many bullies actually believe that people admire their aggression. All right, now we're going to discuss children's moral values. There are factors that drive emerging interest in moral issues, and they include the child's culture, personal experience, and their level of empathy. Children show a variety of skills in making moral judgments, differentiating universal principles from conventional norms, and becoming more socially perceptive. Now we'll discuss Kohlberg's level of moral thought. There are stages of morality that stem from 3 levels of moral reasoning with 2 stages at each level. The first is the pre-conventional moral reasoning, and it emphasizes rewards and punishment. The second is conventional moral reasoning, and it emphasizes social rules. And the third is post-conventional moral reasoning, and it emphasizes moral principles. Kohlberg judged moral development not by the answers, but by the reasons for the answers. Kohlberg's levels could be labeled personal, pre-conventional, communal, conventional, and worldwide, post-conventional. As with any theory, there are pros and cons. The pros include the child's use of intellectual abilities to justify moral actions was correct. Cons include culture and gender differences are ignored, and differences between child and adult morality are not addressed. What children value. Prosocial values among 6 to 11-year-olds. They care for close family members, they cooperate with other children, and do not hurt anyone intentionally. And there is adult versus peer values. You protect your friends, you do not tell adults what is happening, and conform to peer standards of dress, talk, and behavior. As children become more aware of themselves and others in middle childhood, they realize that one person's values may conflict with another's. Concrete operational cognition, which gives children the ability to understand and use logic, propels them to think about morality and try to behave ethically. In terms of developing moral values, throughout middle childhood, moral judgment becomes more comprehensive. Psychological and physical harm, as well as intentions and consequences, are taken into account. There are peer effects on morality in terms of Piaget. The transition from advocating for retribution to restitution occurs between the ages of 8 and 10 years. And now the benefits of time and talking. The graph on the left shows that most children, immediately after the initial punitive response, became even more likely to seek punishment rather than to repair damage. However, after some time and reflection, they affirmed the response Piaget considered more mature. The graph on the right indicates that children who had talked about the broken window example moved toward restorative justice, even examples they had not heard before, which was not true for those who had not talked about the first story. And with that concludes the lecture for Chapter 13.